society where people's needs are met, where people are treated fairly, equally, similarly.
Looking at equity.
Bringing to equality across all levels, no matter, regardless of race, sexual preference, gender, regardless of ability, bringing all of those up to a level playing field.
It plays a huge role when we look at things like lobbyists, and it plays a really large role when people are pursuing their own special interests.
I don't know how strongly it can actually move politicians, but what I do know is that it can change the minds of those who vote. And if a majority of people is saying one thing and their minds are changed through this activism, then, and through a topic being, touted and for lack of a better phrase, scream from the mountaintops that this is something that has to change and this is something that's not good or fair, then if the mindset of the masses changes, then you can change policy. I actually think that it requires a balance between conflict and compromise. And by no means do I try to say that as a cop-out so that I don't have to commit to one side or the other. But what I believe is that in order to reach that compromise, that conflict has to happen. Because if a group of people or population, there's a current policy or issue that is a problem and they don't make a conflict out of it, they don't stand up and say this isn't right, then we can never reach the opportunity to where we can have that compromise and say, okay, we hear your voice, this is what's possible, this is what we can do, this is the decision that we can make through a court system or through a political system. And so if conflict doesn't arise, then what would be the point in going to the trouble to come up with a compromise? And so I feel like the two go hand in hand, and you have to have one in order to have the other.
I don't really necessarily believe that an active citizen has to be a huge advocate for activism. A good active citizen is somebody that should be paying attention to all those things, to listen to those issues, and to make their own personal decisions on them. But to throw all of the weight of their effort and their time behind but one cause is a personal choice, but I don't think it's the only choice you can make. If you diversify and you look at all kinds of different types of activities as a citizen that you could participate in, whether that be voting, whether that be working within small community groups, I don't believe that with full activism, you necessarily have to do that to be a good citizen.
Yes, activism is an incredibly valuable form or incredibly important to being a citizen in politics and changing those policies.
I just don't think it's possible. And I know that sounds like an odd answer to that question because, we often have to consult the theoretical to really appreciate what we actually have. But I really just can't see a world where people in American history or anywhere in any part of the world's history where people aren't self-interested individuals who use those interests to pursue their own agendas. And, whether those be, in the grand scheme of things, negative, the type of agenda that could possibly, be harmful to others in large groups, or the positive activists who have their self-interest and pursue them. To ask a question such as, how would America be different without activism, would be to say, how would America be different without people?
Wow. Like all the topics that wouldn't have ever changed are coming through my head. You know, slavery and the race issues, women and civil rights, with all of those things. And if you think of activism, you think of civil rights, and you think of all the changes that have been made to make at least the progress that we have made, and we still have a long way to go, even with things that we think are over and done with, women's rights, you know, the rights of minorities in terms of race. There are huge discrepancies there. I would hate, I don't want to think of a world where there wasn't activism and where people hadn't stood up for a change that they believed in. It's a scary place to think about, so. Yeah. I don't like it. Yeah.